Hello guys, welcome back to my After Effects tutorial channel. This is Rhandz from Graphix, and today I will be showing you what we are gonna be creating today. Hello guys, we are now inside After Effects and we will start now by creating a new composition. I will name it logo placeholder. 1920 by 1080p, 30 frames per second and 8 seconds duration. Click OK. Then go to the project panel, open this project assets, open the image folder and drop down this logo into the timeline. Press S on the keyboard for the scale. I will just scale it down to 40%. Go to composition, create a new composition. I will name it logo stroke. 1920 by 1080p, 30 frames per second and 8 seconds duration. Click OK. Highlight this logo placeholder, drop it down into the timeline. Then go to Effects and Preset, go to Generate and Vegas. Open image contours, change this input layer to the logo placeholder, change the channel to alpha, and the threshold I will just make it 125, segments 1 and the rotation 252, width is 1, hardness is 1, midpoint position here 0.001, the end opacity 1. Then the color black. Change the blending mode here to transparent. Go to tolerance and change this to 0. The length, change this to 0. Then create a keyframe by hitting this stopwatch on the length. Make sure that your plate is at the beginning of your timeline. Then move forward to 1 second duration and change the length to 1. Then go to composition, create a new composition. I will name it Venetian. 1920 by 1080p, 30 frames per second and 8 seconds duration. Click OK. Go back to your project panel. Drop down this logo placeholder into the timeline. Then go to Effects and Preset. Go to Transition and add Venetian lines. Change the settings on the transition completion here to 97. The direction, change this to 90. Move forward your playhead to 15 frames. Go to feather and create a keyframe by hitting this stopwatch on the feather. Then move forward your playhead to 1 second. Change the feather to 38. Then go back to Effects and Preset. Go to Generate and add Fill. Then I will change the color here to 48, 48, 48. And click OK. Then go to composition and create a new composition. I will name it main. 1920 by 1080p, 30 frames per second and 8 seconds duration. Click OK. Go to layer and create a new solid and make it composite. I will name it BG or background. Click OK. Then go to Effects and Preset. Go to Generate and add Fill. Then change the color here. I'll just type the code 809062. Click OK. Go back to Effects and Preset. I will add grain. Then I will just change the intensity here to 0.800. Then the size, I will change this to 0.400. That should be good enough. Open the color. Change the tint color here to this code. 181C 2B. Click OK. Then go open your project panel. Drop down this logo stroke into the timeline just above the BG. Toggle switches mode in here, make it 3D layer. Then go to Effects and Preset. Go to Blur and Sharpen. Choose this CC Radial Fast Blur. Move your playhead to 4 seconds duration. Create a keyframe on the amount by hitting the stopwatch. Move forward your playhead again to 5 seconds duration and change the amount to 10. Then go back to effects and preset, go to stylize and add glow. I will not change anything in here. Then make sure that this is highlighted and press Ctrl D on your keyboard to duplicate it. I will rename it as caustics. Then I will move back my playhead to 1 second and 14 frames. Press T on my keyboard for opacity. Then I will create a keyframe by hitting the stopwatch on the opacity. Change the opacity here to 0. Then move forward my playhead to 1 second and 26 frames. Change the opacity amount here to 100%. Then go open the project panel and drop down this Venetian into the timeline. Enable the 3D layer here. Press T on your keyboard for the opacity. Then move forward your playhead to 4 seconds. Create a keyframe by hitting the stopwatch on the opacity. Move forward again your playhead to 5 seconds duration and change the opacity here to 0. Highlight all these layers. Press P on your keyboard for the position. Then change the Z position to 21. Then I will highlight this logo stroke and press my keyboard Ctrl D to duplicate it. Drag it up above the Venetian. I will rename it as logo shadow stroke. Then I will highlight this logo shadow stroke. Go to effects control. I will delete this radial fast blur and glow. Then go to effects and preset. Go to blur and sharpen. Add fast box blur. Change the blur radius here to 31. Iterations is 1. Press T on my keyboard for the opacity. Change the amount here to 0. Create a keyframe on the opacity by hitting the stopwatch. Then move back your playhead to the 4 seconds duration. Then change the opacity value here to 100%. Then again I will highlight this one and press on my keyboard Ctrl D to duplicate it. Press U on your keyboard to see the keyframes. Then move back your playhead to 1 second duration and create a keyframe on the blur radius by hitting the stopwatch. Change the blur radius here to 17. Forward your playhead to 1 second and 16 frames duration and change the blur radius here to 5. Press U on your keyboard to see the keyframes. Then I will highlight this logo shadow stroke 2. Press the keyboard Ctrl D to duplicate it. I will rename it as logo shadow stroke top. Press P on your keyboard for the position. Change the Z value here to 0. Then press U on your keyboard to see the keyframes and delete this effect. Then close it. Press on your keyboard Ctrl D to duplicate it. Then I will rename it as logo shadow stroke bottom. Press U on my keyboard to see the keyframes and also Shift P for the position. Then I will change the Z position here to 21. Move your playhead to 7 seconds. Create a keyframe on the position by hitting this stopwatch. Move back your playhead to the 15 frames duration. Then change the Z value to 0. Now go to layer, create a new camera. I'm using a custom preset camera and make sure that the figures here are the same with yours. Click OK. Then go back to layer and create a null object. I will enable the 3D layer on the null object. Parent this camera to the null object. Expand this null object. Expand transform. Make sure that my playhead is at the beginning of the timeline. I will create a keyframe by hitting the stopwatch on the scale, X rotation, Y rotation, and Z rotation. Change the value on the X rotation to 67. The Y rotation, I will change this to -37. Then the Z rotation, I will change this to -7. Then the scale, I will change this to 50%. I will close it. Highlight this and press U on my keyboard to see the keyframes. Then move my playhead forward to 1 second and 29 frames. Then I will change the value on the X rotation to 61. Then the Y rotation, I will change this to 10. Then I will create a keyframe on the scale at 50% and also create a keyframe on the Z rotation. Then move forward your playhead to 3 seconds and 15 frames. Then change the X rotation here to 0. Y rotation is 0. And also the Z rotation. Then change the scale value to 157. So this is what it looks like. Now go to your project panel and drop down this logo stroke into the timeline. Move back your playhead to 1 second duration. Go to edit and split the layer. Then delete this splitted layer. Move forward to 1 frame. Highlight this logo stroke layer. Press T on your keyboard for the opacity. Change the value here to 0. Create a keyframe on the opacity by hitting this stopwatch. Move forward your playhead to 1 second and 14 frames duration. And change the opacity to 100%. Then move forward your playhead to the 4 seconds duration and create a keyframe here by hitting this tiny diamond. Then move forward again your playhead to the 5 seconds duration and change the opacity to 0. Enable the 3D layer. I will just rename this to logo stroke 1. Highlight it again. Press my keyboard Ctrl D to duplicate it 6 times. I will highlight all these layers. Press P on your keyboard for the position. Change this to 2 on the Z position. This one 3, 6. This one 9, 12, 15. This one is 19. Go to composition and create a new composition. I will name it logo stroke outline. 1920 by 1080p, 30 frames per second and 8 seconds duration. Click OK. Then I will go to my project panel and drop down this logo placeholder into the timeline. Then go to effects and preset. Go to generate Vegas. I will change the color here to black. Change the opacity to 1. I will change the width here to 3. And the blending mode, I will change this to stencil. Image contours, I will change this to 125. Tolerance is 0. Segment is 1. Rotation is 180. The midpoint position is 001. Then go to layer and create a new adjustment layer. Go to effects and preset, generate fill. Highlight this adjustment layer, press T on your keyboard for the opacity and change the opacity here to 10%. You can see here, this is not what we want, so all you have to do is to go back to logo placeholder, go to channel, change the intensity here to alpha, enable the transparency so you can see. So now I'm gonna go to composition and create a new composition. I will name it 3D stroke. Click OK. Then open project panel, drop down this logo stroke outline into the timeline. Make it a 3D layer. Press your keyboard Ctrl D to duplicate it 20 times. Then I will highlight it all. Press P on my keyboard for the position. Then one by one I will change the Z position. I will start at 20. Then this one is 19. I will just speed it up guys, so I don't want you to wait for long. Go to layer, create a new adjustment layer. Then go to effects and preset, go to generate, add fill. Then highlight it, press T on your keyboard for the opacity. Just change opacity value to 0. Disable the visibility. As you can see in here, there's a little bit of redness around the circle. That's what we want, okay? So now I will open back to the main. Go to project panel, open it up, highlight this 3D stroke, drop it down into the timeline. Then move back your playhead to the 1 second and 15 frames. Press open bracket key to move that layer. Enable the 3D layer, press T on your keyboard for the opacity and Shift S for the scale. I will enable the scale proportion here, change this Z value to 0. Then I will create a keyframe on the scale by hitting the stopwatch and on the opacity. And I want to make sure that this opacity is 0. Move the playhead forward to 1 second and 22 frames and change the opacity to 100%. Then move forward your playhead to 2 seconds and 15 frames. Change the value on the Z scale to 100%. Then move forward again your playhead to the 4 seconds duration. Create a keyframe here by hitting this tiny diamond on the opacity. Move forward to 5 seconds. Change the opacity here to 0. Move back your playhead to 121 seconds. Then highlight this 3D logo stroke. Press your keyboard Ctrl D to duplicate it. Press open bracket key to move that layer. Press U on your keyboard to see the keyframes. I will move my playhead to the 4 seconds duration. Highlight these keyframes and move these keyframes on that duration. Go to composition, create a new composition. I will name it liquid transition. Click OK. Then go to layer, create a new solid, and I will name it fractal. Make it comp size. Click OK. Then go to effects and preset. Go to noise and grain, fractal noise. Change the contrast here to 1936 and the brightness is -990. The complexity is 1. Expanded subsettings seems okay to me, and I will just create a keyframe on the contrast and on the brightness. Make sure that your playhead is at the beginning of your timeline. Open transform. Change the scale here to 179.2. Then move forward your playhead to the 5 second duration and change here the contrast to 1117. Then the brightness, change this to 680. Then I will highlight the fractal and press U on my keyboard to see the keyframes. So this is what we got. Now all I have to do is to go to composition and create a new composition. Name it liquid logo. Click OK. Open the project panel and drop down this liquid transition into the timeline and also the logo placeholder. Toggle switches mode in here. Change the blending mode on the liquid transition to stencil luma. Just open the liquid transition again. Open effects control. I will just add curves. Go to color correction and curves. Make the graph like this. Go to composition, create a new composition. I will name it border shadow. Then click OK. Open the project panel and drop down the liquid logo into the timeline. Go to effects and preset. Go to generate, fill. Then change the color here to black. Then highlight the liquid logo. Press your keyboard Ctrl D to duplicate it. Then change the color here to white. Then go to layer, create a new adjustment layer. Enable the transparency and move your playhead forward so you can see the shape better. Then go to effects and preset, go to blur and sharpen, add fast box blur. Make this iteration 1 and the amount of blur radius is 16. Check the repeat edge pixels. Highlight this liquid logo, go to effects and preset and add simple choker. Then change the choke matte here to 7 as you can see. Then go to composition and create another composition. I will name it reflection map. 1920 by 1080p, 30 frames per second and 8 seconds duration. Click OK. Go back to my project panel and open these project assets. I will open the image and drop down this reflection map into the timeline. Go to layer, create a new adjustment layer. Go to effects and preset, go to distort, add offset. Highlight this offset, create a keyframe on the shift center, then move your playhead to the end of your timeline. Move this anchor point on the right side, like that. Then I will go to effects and preset. I will add color correction, curves. I will just darken it a bit like this. So if we will play this one, let's see. Yeah, that's what I want. Now go to composition and create a new composition. I will name it liquid reflection. (1920 by 1080p, 30 frames per second, 8 seconds duration. Click OK. I will disable the transparency. Go back to the project panel, open it up, and drop down this border shadow into the timeline, the reflection map, and the liquid logo. Disable the visibility on the liquid logo. Then highlight this reflection map. Go to effects and preset. Go to stylize. Go to CC glass. Open the surface. Change the bump map to the border shadow. Change the softness here to 15.5. The height is 80. And the displacement is -500. Go back to effects and preset. Go to distort, CC bloblize. Open blobbiness. Change the blob layer here to border shadow. Change the softness to 4 and the cutaway is 0. Then change the track matte here to alpha matte. Then I will highlight these layers. Press my keyboard Ctrl D to duplicate it. Then I will change the blending mode here to screen. Then go to composition, create a new composition. I will name it logo animate. 1920 by 1080p, 30 frames per second, 8 seconds duration. Click OK. Go open your project panel, drop down this liquid logo into the timeline and this liquid reflection just above the liquid logo. Then change the blending mode here to screen. Go open the main and enable the collapse transformation switch on the 3D logo stroke. Then go to your project panel and drop down this logo animate into the timeline. Then move your playhead to 1 second and 21 frames. Press open bracket key to move that layer. Press T on your keyboard for opacity. Move your playhead to 5 seconds and 15 frames. Create a keyframe on the opacity and move your playhead to 7 seconds. And change the opacity to 0. Highlight this logo animate. Press Ctrl D to duplicate it. Enable the 3D layer. Then go to the project panel. Drop down this logo placeholder into the timeline. Move your playhead back to 5 seconds and 15 frames. Press open bracket key to move that layer. Enable the 3D layer here. Press T on your keyboard for opacity. Change the opacity value here to 0. Create a keyframe. Move your playhead forward to 7 seconds duration. And change the opacity value to 100%. Then go to composition and create a new composition. I will name it text. I will change the width here to 1000 and the height I will change this to 200. Click OK. Grab the text tool and type tagline here. I'm using a font called Novel Sans Round, extra light, and the size is 80 pixels. The lead is 97. I will align it horizontally and vertically. Expand this layer, go to animate, choose this tracking. Make sure that you play this at the beginning of your timeline. Create a keyframe on the tracking amount. Change the tracking amount here to 37. Then move forward your play to 2 seconds and 15 frames. Change this tracking amount to 0. Add properties here. choose this blur. Now create a keyframe by hitting this stopwatch on the blur. Then move back your playhead at the beginning of the timeline. Change the blur radius here to 74. Then go back to the properties and add opacity. Hit the stopwatch in here to create a keyframe on the opacity and change the value here to 0. Move forward to the 2 and 15 frames duration and change the opacity to 100%. Then move back your plate again to the beginning of the timeline. Open selector 1. Create a keyframe on the start. Again, move your playhead to 2 seconds and 15 frames and change the start value to 100%. Open the advance. Turn on the randomize order. The random seed, change this to 30. So now I will open the main. Then I will drop down this text into the timeline. Press P on my keyboard for the position and Shift S for the scale. Change the Y value here on the position to 838. Then the scale, I will change this to 60%. Then I will highlight it. Go to Effects, Preset, go to Color Correction. Then I will change this to grayish. I'll just type 59, 57, 57. Then click OK. Then the map block 2, I will change this to 48, 48, 48. Then I will move back my playhead to the 3 seconds duration. Make sure that this is highlighted. Press open bucket key to move that layer. So now guys, I'm gonna go back to my project panel and open this assets folder. Open my sound effects and I will just drop this down into the timeline. I will just mute it and let's preview this. So now guys, we are done with our tutorial and I hope that you like it. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, even share it to your friends. Also press the notification bell so that you will get alerts if I have new videos to upload, okay? So guys, motivate yourself to keep on learning. Thank you guys for watching and see you next time. God bless.